CoffeePods, a podcast of the Acorn Christian Healing Foundation, exploring what's happening in the world through the lens of Christian healing.
It is so good to be back with a familiar face. This is great to have an excuse to hang out with my son.
Hey, it's good to be back. And today I think we're going to be talking about Mamdani, the new mayor of New York City, and a few other things.
Well, I kind of asked you, I said, what are some of the things that younger people are talking about these days? And you were like, well, politics, and not just politics, but this one particular young politician who just recently won the mayoral race in New York City, which I guess doesn't really affect people in London, but it's kind of emblematic of a generational change. And I thought, that's actually a good thing for us to talk about, and then maybe talk a little bit more about Christian nationalism and what people under the age of 30 are thinking about religion and politics these days.
So who is Zoran Kwame Mamdani, the new mayor-elect of New York City?
Tell me about him. I honestly don't know much about him other than the propaganda that's reached my social media feed, which is a lot.
Yeah, from lots of different sources too, sadly. Well, the first thing is Zoran Mamdani is a politician, and he is the first Democratic Socialist to be elected mayor of New York City. So that title might scare some people, but let's dive into who he is. So Mamdani was born in Kampala, Uganda, which most folks probably don't even know where that is. But his early years, his mom is a filmmaker, and they moved around quite a bit. And Mamdani is of Indian descent, though he wasn't born in India. So he kind of leapfrogged to a few places, but ended up in the Bronx in New York City at the age of 7, I believe.
Yeah, so I guess since he was not born on U.S. soil, he can never be president of the United States, kind of like you, since you were born in England.
Isn't it interesting that some of the most American, air quoting that, people out there can't lead the country because of that rule? Which is, some would argue, is a shame. But anyway, putting that aside, Mamdani is kind of a big wake in the political scene. So on social media, for those that aren't on TikTok and Instagram, as I mentioned earlier, Mamdani has kind of mastered the art of reaching young eyeballs, young, impressionable people on social media. And he's reached me on my social media. And he's really created a stir. One of the best little trivia questions about Mamdani is that he's not only known for his politics, but before he went into politics, when he was in his early 20s, he actually did professional rap music.
He was a rapper. I saw this. It's Young Cardamom.
Go ahead, make a rap for your naughty. It's a rap. Get the guap, spin the rack on your...
The track that I listened to this morning, actually, because I knew we were talking about this, was something called Nani, which he wrote a rap tribute to his grandmother from Delhi. His grandmother was a social worker in Delhi, and he made this really cool rap song about his cultural pride and affection for his grandmother. So it's actually really cool that he's not just a politician; he's an artist. He's a creative, and he's got a heart.
I think he's such a fascinating guy, and for me as a young person, it's so much more easy to access the way he speaks, what he represents, than maybe the older generation, the Andrew Cuomo's of politics.
Yeah. Now, I don't want us to miss out on saying this guy comes from an amazing family, because his mom went to Harvard. She's been an Academy Award nominee. She won a Cannes Film Festival Award as a filmmaker. And his father is a political theorist who went to Pitt, and he went to Tufts, which is where your grandfather studied for a summer, and he got his PhD from Harvard in 1974, and he actually teaches government at Columbia University right now. So, his parents are artistic and creative and religious and smart. And so, of course, this guy has kind of risen up from this family system to decide, hey, I can make a difference in the world, not just by rapping, but by actually getting engaged in politics. So I think it's great.
Yeah. I think he's so interesting. I've been really enjoying learning about him and what he stands for. I mean, some of the big things you'll hear, the pop phrases he'll use are affordability, affordable housing, justice, Palestinian rights, which has got him in hot water with his election.
Exactly.
And there's a really funny one. So those were serious ones. There's a really funny one he made up a word in his campaign, which is jotted down here next to me. Halalflation.
New York is suffering from a crisis, and it's called halalflation. Today, we're going to get to the bottom of this.
So do you know what halal food is? So in New York City, people are mad that halal food was too expensive. And so he actually used that in his campaign as a joke, saying there's halal inflation, which I think is really, really genius.
So within the Muslim communities, there's a rising cost, and he came up with a buzz term for that.
So this is
cool. I mean, he's only been in. He was elected like 4 or 5 years ago to the state assembly, so he's fairly new to politics. But my goodness, what a rising star he's become. And I don't know all that much about him, but I just think he has sort of hit. He's resonating with young people. And I think that's the part that I find deeply curious, is that something's changing in the political scene where young people who speak the language of young people are suddenly stepping into the light as these 80 plus age people who celebrate their 40th year in Congress step aside. And it does, and again, we're speaking to the American political climate. We've got some notes about the UK political scene as well, but it is just kind of a very interesting Amerocentric thing that's happening. And I think that there'll be repercussions around the world with other young people coming into elected power.
I think what we're seeing with Zoran is something that we haven't seen before, or we haven't seen before to this extent. The fact that he's a Muslim man, and the fact that he calls himself a democratic socialist, two big glaring red lights for some people. Yeah, and also in terms of the world of politics. Have become two places where he's been attacked. And I think it's talking about Zoran, I think we have to address that. I mean, it seems pretty obvious to say if you spend a couple minutes reading about him, that he's not a communist.
That's the thing I keep seeing over and over again, that, we've elected a communist in New York City and a communist, because it's a word that for a lot of Americans, it's red lights flashing. It's the Soviet Union, and so people immediately go, "Oh, well, that Mamdani's a communist," and they even say "commie," and so tell me how, what's the difference between democratic socialism, which is what you just told me was his open stance, and communism. Give me the whistle stop tour through the difference, because I think it's important before we talk about religion. We're really setting a foundation here. How is he not a communist then?
So I think it comes down to the way we govern. I think communism is seizing the means of production. It is a pure version of Marxism. Some people have even evolved into Leninism, but it is a approach to how to govern. Democratic socialism is a way of doing government in our system that some would see as better. So I think democratic socialism advocates for public control of essential services. I mean, Mamdani talked about this a lot. Housing and transport. He wants to have free buses, and he wants to cap rent prices so landlords can't take advantage of their renters. He wants to push for, I don't know if he's going to get this because it's America, universal health care.
Right.
And another really big thing he's pushing for is workers' rights. So there's lots of different things that might be confusing if you're trying to pick them out individually. But the things he promotes, all for the most part, fall under the umbrella of democratic socialism, which is
some limited government control. So I mean, we pay for the military, we pay for police and fire service. So we already have a system which has some things that are paid for by taxes. He just wants to extend that a little bit farther to help more people, and that people suddenly think, oh no, that's communism, because communism's the abolition of private property and state control of all industry, and that's not at all what I'm hearing from him. I mean, I think he wants sensible government in reach into things that have become so dominated by capitalism and greed that the common person has been, kind of thrown off the edge. And I think, what was the quote? He said, I want to transform the most expensive city in America into one that's affordable to each and every person who calls it their home. I mean, that's a cool thing, that his vision is not let's all get rich, but it's let's all find joy and happiness where we live. And but it is a different way of doing life.
I find it fascinating who funded his opponents in the election and who funded him. So you have these, if for folks that don't know how American elections work, which a lot of people do at this point because Donald Trump became president, there are these things called PACs, which are mega donators coming together to create basically a big pile of cash they can dump on candidates. Those PACs usually have like common ground on topics they want to push for. So you have pro-Israel, you have all these other, I'm not going to go into the details. You have all these other PACs that stand for these big topics, these big issues.
And most people around the world kind of go, are you kidding me? They allow people to pour money in to influence advertising on television, and so you can buy an election, because that's what it sounds like when you're living in Europe and you're looking at America. You say, so a billionaire can give a bunch of money to tip the scales for a particular candidate who shares their ideology. That can't happen in England.
Zoran calls it corruption, straight up. Out in the open, he'll go to rallies and say that is corrupt. But what's fascinating is Mamdani won a massive election. This is the biggest city in America, the center of capitalism, arguably. And he didn't have hardly, like, in terms of money, in terms of support from PACs, it wasn't there. It was a truly, I would say, a grassroots movement, which is rare to see in the American political landscape, to see a guy that has risen to where he has risen to and is still rising, not be backed by billionaires, essentially.
It is a very risky position to say, I can't be bought. But in order to say that, you still have to be able to get the votes. And I think people were a bit surprised, because suddenly the power of democracy is on full display. Because if democracy works, then that means that the candidates with the most votes win. And, you can grassroots movements with social media. Your generation knows better than anybody about virality and how you can take a video like he did on TikTok and suddenly, 6 million views on a video of him on the New York subway. And you're going, oh, so that works. And that works a whole lot more effectively than a millionaire dropping, $2 million campaign contribution to do X, Y, and Z. The old way of doing politics, I think, is really going to go away.
I think the political landscape is radically changing because of social media, and arguably not for the best. I think that Mamdani figured out how to show solidarity to essentially every demographic under the age of 40 in New York City. He blanketed his social media with videos for every single demographic. He spoke the language. So the Latinx population in New York City, he did Spanish videos. The Jewish population, he did videos with Jewish leaders. For Arabic New York, I mean, this is so smart, and it worked.
So he's not a communist. So that, I think you've established to me that when I hear that I should go, that's just propaganda. He's not a communist. It sounds like he's a pretty nice guy. I don't know him, but I could imagine he'd be really fun to sit on the other side of a table and have dinner with and just talk. He seems interesting, just an interesting person.
I kind of want to transition the conversation into a place of talking about religion in our politics, religion in public life. What role does it play? Or are we better off just being secular and having a complete separation?
What do you think? This is a good transition, because I think what's happened is you have, religion and secularism and this idea of power all colliding. And so then Mamdani's Muslim identity becomes not just something that's personal for him, but then it becomes political. And so his religion is front and center to how people suggest he will govern. And so I think it's very interesting that he was actually backed by a coalition of clerics of different religions, of educators, of activists. So he was raised in a family that celebrated both Islamic and Hindu traditions. So, because this sort of reflects his Ugandan Indian heritage at home. And so I think this, maybe you can speak more to this, but this idea of pluralism is so vital, but also becomes very threatening to some people, because he had all the support from all these different religious leaders and people across religious lines. So tell me, when you see that, you don't seem threatened by the idea of a pluralistic political leader. In fact, you seem to feel more comfortable with the notion that somebody can dance in the presence of a multicultural reality.
I think that freedom is a beautiful thing. I think that somebody that promotes such a freedom is the sort of person I'd want in office. I think Mamdani really pushes for individual freedom, individual expression, allowing you to believe and worship or not worship in the ways you want. I think we're coming out of an age, since Rome practically, where everything is determined for you to a certain degree. There's an expectation of how to act. I mean, an example of this is in France, where I am right now. When you go to drink a certain type of wine, in some households, there is a certain glass that goes with that wine. And if you, like I did once, go over to the cabinet and pick the wrong glass, you will be told, well, how could you drink wine out of
white wine in a sherry glass or in a champagne glass,
or Gewürz out of whatever glass, right? It's still real, but it's like ripples. A big stone has dropped in the water, and what we experience is little ripples of human tendency almost. And I think Mamdani is the ultimate rhythm breaker of that, because he just says, no, do your own thing. Enjoy your life.
I like that, a rhythm breaker. That's a good way of putting it, because he really does kind of step into the flow of a world that said, ultra wealth is success, and Christianity is the most important thing. And so these ideas were the bedrock of Western society. And he's kind of stepping into that stream and saying, no, there are a lot of good people in lots of different places and different nations with different religions and different ideas. We can love each other and be very, very different. And we can still enjoy each other's fellowship and not feel threatened. But everybody wants to eat a crust of bread. Everybody wants to eat. Everybody wants to have a happy family. And everybody wants to watch TV and play video games and do the things that make you happy.
I think a Christianity that forces everyone to be Christian or to follow the ideas of Christianity ceases to be Christian. I think the Christianity I follow is a Christianity of freedom, of individual expression.
I was going to say the word force that you used there is the one that jumped out at me. Christianity that forces anything ceases to be Christian, because I don't think Jesus was about forcible discipleship. If God wanted us to conform and would force conformity, then there would be no other religion on the earth, because Almighty God would simply say, all of you are little robots and I control you. But he gave the world freedom to love and experience God. And then I'm a Christian too. And so I believe he sent his son to basically show us the way. And Jesus embodies love and generosity in the world. And so that's kind of my plumb line where I go to try and figure out, what's the right way to deal with these things? Oh, well, what would Jesus do? And that seems trite and silly, but I think it works. I think it's a really good thing.
And to round out this thought, I'll provide some numbers. So in the 1990s, 86 to 90% of Americans identified as Christian. So fast forward, 2005, that figure dropped to 78%. And now it's under 62%. So there is a radical decline. But I like the idea that church, the Christian faith, is like an orchestra. Instead of we all are the same instrument, we are a collection of individuals with our own rhythms, creating our music together.
Exactly. And imagine an orchestra all playing the same note. How boring. How boring. What makes the great musical scores that are behind my favorite movies are the fact that there's such incredible variety and harmonization, and the energy that rises and falls in the different aspects of the music to bring drama to the screen. When you see a great movie and then you hear a great score and you think, I watched a thing about the making of the Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the score behind that, and Williams is just a master. And he talks about how he came up with even the pitches for the spacecraft speaking to the people. Da da dum dum dum, and it's something so simple. But imagine if it was just ba 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 ba, just the same note. That'd be boring. Christianity is about the color, and Steven Spielberg was like, oh yeah, this music, we should have color. And so he creates a disco light show in Close Encounters to accent this incredible music, to tell the story of the encounter with this alien people, that it becomes a dance of color, a dance of music, and ultimately a dance with Richard Dreyfuss being taken by the hand and led into the mothership.
Let's dance into something not so fun. Okay. Christian nationalism.
Oh my gosh.
I just went from Spielberg and wonderful art to something not so wonderful. I do apologize.
Jaws and the shark.
You're going to need a bigger boat.
Yeah, that's it. I feel like I'm getting... That brings us to the end of the first part of this 2-part episode. We really hope you enjoyed this one. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe for more.